It's now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rajiv Hazra, the CEO of Quantinuum, or Raj as we call him, to provide our first industry perspective. He has more than 3 decades of experience in supercomputing, quantum, and technical roles around the world. And prior to joining Quantinuum, he served as a general manager for compute networking business unit at Micron Technologies, and he spent 25 years at the Intel Corporation. And he was leading the enterprise and the government group. Before joining Intel in '95, Raj was with the Lockheed Corporation based at NASA's Langley Research Center. And in addition to his impressive track record as a leader in technology, he has also recently announced a $600 million equity raise, which includes NVIDIA and others as key partners and investors. This raise values the company at an impressive $10 billion. Raj, congratulations, and please come share what we can expect to see and hear from Quantinuum in the days, months, and years ahead. Please welcome Raj Hazra.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. It's my second time here. I remember being here about a year ago. And I have to say, what a difference a year makes, right? It also happens to be the year of quantum. But if you look back at what's happened over the year, whether you're associated with the technology in the business, whether you're associated as an investor in the sector, whether you're part of the policymaking portion of the sector, whether you're in academia, it's been an amazing year. And from me and from Quantinuum, congratulations to all our fellow travelers for the year that it's been, and hope to continue that pace. It really does feel a little heady sometimes. If you look at this morning, particularly the Financial Awakening slide, I'm sure you read in the papers or the science papers some of the tremendous progress being made, both on the hardware side as well as the algorithm side. It sure does feel heady. And I think for us at Quantinuum, we take that as tailwinds instead of a maelstrom and craft our way forward to the vision that we always have had. So I call our view of the International Year of Quantum the turning point from the age of discovery, and I don't mean the discovery ended, but it's discovery of what's our path. For many, that was an answer to a technical question or a set of technical questions, but to the age of accelerating now down that path. And I want to spend the remaining 15 minutes and 40 seconds telling you what that means for Quantinuum. So let's start with, is it actually moving? Well, my slides aren't accelerating, which is, now they are. Now I know what force to apply. Our commitment, and we made this at the Quantum World Congress last year, was that we were going to build the first universal, fully fault-tolerant quantum computer at scale. This has been our North Star. This has been our North Star, and we said we would not just do this, we would do that in this decade. It was not a statement of simple aspirations of reaching a technological level. What we believe, whether it's in the 700 people that work in the company, whether you're in hardware, software, any of the functional groups, that this becomes a tipping point to commercial value creation for the entire sector, solving humankind's biggest challenges, creating untold amount of economic value, and then moving the state-of-the-art forward for the industry and the sector. But first, we also said, as we mature as an industry, and we keep talking about our accomplishments and comparing ourselves to others, we need to be really rigorous about what we mean by universal, fully fault-tolerant quantum computing, or a quantum computer that purports to that label. So what we mean by universal, and I won't take more than 2 minutes of this class, is it performs any computation allowed by quantum mechanics. If it's not universal, it can be simulated by a classical computer. A powerful classical computer can do it. And therefore, we believe in universality, that this enables the unique and important and critical advantages of having quantum computing as part of the computing infrastructure that's available to society. And to do that, you have to execute both Clifford and non-Clifford gates. What is fully fault tolerant? If you look at what fully fault tolerant means, it's fault tolerant in all operations at the gates: encoding, measurements, syndrome extraction, teleportation. So what we mean is, if you're a user or if you're a developer, it means you can write code not wondering rather, whether it's your algorithm at fault or the computer at fault or both, right? That is why this is such an important target to achieve, because without achieving a universal, fully fault-tolerant quantum computer, we will not be able to make quantum computing an essential, integral part of the computing infrastructure for many, many, many critical applications that need that compute power, that need that computing paradigm. So we therefore put this out. These 2 slides are our commitment to a definition that we believe we hold ourselves to, and not just say, hey, we made progress or we've done this, but hold ourselves, and I invite the industry and our partners here and our fellow travelers to sign on to these kinds of industry-wide aspirations and standards. On our to-do list last year, as we stared at the International Year of Quantum, this was literally my post-it, was fault tolerance at scale, getting to this fully fault tolerant. We had done real-time syndrome extraction. We had started looking very aggressively at high rate error correcting codes, but we were still working on essentially this thing called non-Clifford gates, and therefore achieving a fault-tolerant universal gate set. While we had the Clifford gates knocked out, the much more difficult non-Clifford gates were still a challenge to be solved, and a significant challenge to be solved. Well, today, it's with great pleasure, and about a year later, that I can tell you that we've got a green check on that post-it. And I can now retire the post-it from my active to-do list to my museum of company's accomplishments. And we did this. It sounds easy. It sounds like it could fit on a slide, but we did this by coming up with an entirely new protocol that uses the lowest number of physical qubits, somewhere in the range of 28 to 29, versus hundreds that the previous best known methods could create, and the least number of 2-qubit gates, physical gates, as well as measurements. And what all that means is you can then very efficiently apply error correction, repeated error correction, and achieve not just the first 2-qubit non-Clifford gate on a commercial quantum computer, but you can do that at 10x better than break even, which is really the point. If you create a non-Clifford gate and you're doing error correction, and if it's no better than the physical gate that you could create, why did you do it in the first place? So if you're a developer, as a software guy, I would say, yeah, that's what I need. If you give me more compute resources, they better be more reliable. And it's even higher than 10x. If you see that the best known state of the art actually uses post-selection. So with this protocol, which we think is an industry breakthrough, we believe is an industry breakthrough, we've now achieved, for the first time, a universal gate set that shows that property of fully fault tolerant, because as you apply error correction, you can continue to improve the fidelity of the non-Clifford gate. So with that, as we worked on bringing universality to life, one of these days I will get that word right, we also had to hit some world records. Logical magic state fidelity and logical teleportation is necessary if you are going to do non-Clifford gates. You look at the 2-qubit logical non-Clifford gates fidelity. This is with error detection for full transparency, and we're working on the same methodology of looking at 2-qubit logical non-Clifford gate fidelity with error correction. And we had to have the best logical state preparation and measurement fidelities of 99.997 in order to be able to generate these non-Clifford gate fidelities. As we looked beyond universal to getting the logical qubits then that were universal or could support universal functions, we hit a few other world records as well. The logical magic state fidelity, teleportation that you've seen, but then we also looked at what makes this useful beyond a technical publication. What makes it useful to actually run applications? The longest lived logical qubit, the best qubit in the world, if it disappears in the blink of an eye, is not of much use. In quantum parlance, seconds is like a lifetime. When you look at decoherence that's measured in milliseconds, 23 seconds, the longest lived logical qubit. We also innovated on the highest logical to physical qubit ratio. And this is important because this is a resource issue. If you can create very high quality logical qubits, but you're on the wrong side of scaling, that is, you need more and more physical qubits as you need more and more logical qubits, your systems get more complex. They probably get more unreliable with more complexity. Definitely cost goes up because you got to control those qubits. And for the first time, and I don't believe we've seen results on this yet from anybody else, the largest logical quantum volume of 256. So if you just look at this, 7 world records as we persevered and accelerated on that path of building universal, fully fault-tolerant technology capability to put into our roadmap. But 7 seemed like really an odd number, right? It is an odd number, right? 8 would be better. It's also a power of 2. So like an old classical compute guy, that makes me feel much better. Doing so, we shattered our own QV world record, reaching 2 to the power 25 on our H2 commercial quantum computer. And just to give you a sense of where we stand, this just wasn't eking out a number 1 lead. The number 2 company QV is at 2 to the power 11, which is 2,048. So all in all, it was a remarkable year in terms of moving the roadmap forward to what we've always held as a North Star, which is building quantum computers that are universal, fully fault-tolerant, programmable, and that bring value beyond just the science accomplishments of building that quantum computer. In order to do that, we actually have been looking at what does it take for developers to use this technology more efficiently, more effectively, and we came out with an entirely new programming language. In the past, this is as significant as taking programming from machine language or assembly language to high-level languages like C and C++, that today most people would say, I don't know how anyone programmed in machine code or using EBCDIC or hex codes, right? But that is what we've done with Guppy, which is hosted in Python. It treats programs like programs were supposed to be treated, with things like loops and conditional logic. It also allows the programmers and the developers to actually tie into the critical error correction primitives so that you can actually measure in real time and take action. And so this is, we believe, a quantum jump, no pun intended, in being able to not just build these much more powerful and capable quantum computers, but actually program them. 30 years of working in the classical industry has taught me, if you don't take care of developers, no one's going to use your hardware, right? So this is a very significant step forward for us. And we made this compatible with kind of NVIDIA's approach. We're one of the partners in their effort to build out a consistent infrastructure between CUDA and CUDA-Q and the quantum stack, if you will, at least from us. The really exciting thing is what do you do with all of this? Right? I mean, if for the last 15 minutes you've been looking at your watch going, please, I don't want to hear about magic states and distillation and teleportation, you should at least ask me this question. What are you going to do with all of this? And this is really our entire goal, is to enable applications, is to enable solutions to problems you couldn't do before. We call this GenQ AI. I talked about it at GTC. But this is where we use quantum-generated data, this new data source, which for the first time can very accurately model phenomena of multi-body interactions. That's a big word, but that's like, in other words, saying chemical reactions. And so this is where this is all headed, and how do you use the confluence of AI and quantum to achieve something you couldn't do with just one of them. And that's from Gen AI, which we all know and understand and probably use, to Gen Q AI, where we are using the quantum computer to generate data that could never have been generated before, and train generative AI engines to do things that they either couldn't do before, or now can do more accurately and using less resources. You heard in the previous talk why one of the threats to this explosion of AI is energy use, right? And that isn't just coming up with a faster processor, but it's coming up with a new methodology, so you don't have to use that much energy. So think of an AI engine that has a brute force search, and you can cut its search down by a factor of 100. You haven't built a faster computer, but what you've done is you've built a much faster process to go from problem statement to solution. That's huge. That's huge not in megawatts and gigawatts, that's huge in billions of dollars for industries that are like drug and pharma that are looking at these saying, how can I cut down the drug discovery time, and not just the cost of it, from 5 to 7 years to 1 to 2 years? What's that tool? So we are working with partners, NVIDIA is definitely one of them, on 3 particular areas where we believe GenQ AI is extremely promising. One is in drug discovery, as I just talked about. The other is in high-temperature superconductors. And while this may seem like a nice physics area, it has some very practical implications on things like next-generation transmission lines. And then this large world of data. Just 10 years ago, people would talk about the big data problem of the world, right? That hasn't gone away. And how do you look at massive data sets, whether it's in finance, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in national security, and then start applying quantum algorithms to understand that data, make sense of it, predict. And this is an entirely new field of what we understood as machine learning being enabled with quantum information technology and quantum computing. So for us, this has been a perfect way to celebrate the International Year of Quantum. 8 world records. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that all of this is also going to be embodied in real things that you can use, feel, and touch, and do what you need to do in order to advance your mission. And so for that, Helios, the world's most powerful quantum computer, the first one to hit 50 logical qubits in a commercial system, is going to come to you in the International Year of Quantum. I won't tell you the date yet because I still got to keep some secrets. And it is our Quantinuum's present to the community and the sector. With that, thank you. With that, we see the International Year of Quantum as a year of breakthroughs, not just for us, for everybody that is persevering in this field. Congratulations to you. May the force be with you. And for sure, for collectively all of us, a future accelerated, not just into thousands, tens of thousands, millions of qubits, all doing things, solving problems in energy and healthcare and understanding our basic sciences that we could have only hoped for. And I cannot think of a better legacy to leave for the next generations to come. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Raj. Wow. Wow. I mean, if you take some time to absorb the breakthroughs and the advances that Raj just shared, it is truly remarkable. Some stellar progress that Quantinuum continues to make.